Welcome. You are watching the OBR streaming network. It is June 18th, the year 2024. This is a brand new edition of the React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the one and only Pete Smith. You can follow him on X at _ Pete Smith _. What's happening, Pete?
Not too much. Start of the break. But there's still plenty to talk about, which is interesting.
Yeah, there is plenty to talk about. We've got a number of videos here tonight. We've got Cooper holdout to keep an eye on and everything else going on around the league. People weighing in on the Browns, and then, the Hard Knocks news, which we'll talk about later too, which should be an interesting, make for an interesting December. As they open up their doors to Hard Knocks once again. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But we appreciate you all filing into the chat. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe. Tell a friend. If you're over on X, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report and hit subscribe. All right, so first video we are reacting to tonight is, I've never heard of this show before, Pete. I stumbled upon it. It's called Clean Pocket, and it's A.Q. Shipley, who's on the McAfee show a lot, Jay Gruden, Colt McCoy, and who's the other fella in here? Do you know who that is?
Justin Pugh
or
A.Q. Shipley. Justin Pugh and A.Q. Shipley are both in there.
Yeah, Justin Pugh. That's Duffin's guy, right? Duffin goes on Pugh's show sometimes. So, but yeah, so these four make up this podcast here, and this very episode is just about the Browns. So I'll let you we're gonna react to it. Let's throw it up here and see what we think. Hello. Not playing? Try again. Huh. It's not great.
I don't know what Jay Gruden wrote in that notebook, but based on what I saw, there's nothing on that paper about the Browns.
No, yeah. This is not ideal. So let's try this again. I apologize. And if that doesn't work, we'll move to another one and come back, I guess. Let's see. I tested it out earlier. We're getting nothing from this, Pete. Frozen. Okay. Let's try our next video here. This is PFT talking to Amari Cooper. I don't know what's going on here, but let's give it a shot. Hey. Apologize for having a little technical difficulties here. We'll see if we can get this sorted out. Then that one doesn't want to play either. Well, shucks, Pete. We may just be talking, brother. I don't know why these aren't playing. Let's try this again here. I don't know if we're gonna get. We got a question from the chat here. 1 second. No, it's not that. I don't know what is going on here. Frozen. Strange. Well, Pete.
Fire away.
Without I don't know what is going on here, but without turning off the stream and doing something crazy here to stop it, let's just talk about the topics that we were going to talk about, right? Let's start with Amari Cooper. Okay. We've got I got to tell you, I've seen a couple places. I don't know if did you see the live from our guy Brandon Ayuk the other night of him saying they don't want me anymore to Jaden Daniels on social media. Did you see that?
I did not. All I've seen was the suggestion that the hypothetical trade that the Browns would send Amari Cooper and a third-round pick for Brandon Ayuk, to which my reaction is, I hope this is binding because I've already packed Amari Cooper's stuff and he's gone. I love Amari Cooper. He's a very good receiver, but that is the easiest deal ever. And I'd pay him all $121 million, and that would be the end of it. Brandon Ayuk is a phenomenal receiver. He's everything that I think the Browns want at that position. Size, physicality. There would already be a statue in Cleveland if he had just the game against the 49ers in a Browns uniform where he dominated as a pass catcher. And then on Christian McCaffrey's touchdown run, he impaled 3 Steelers with blocks.
Yes.
Just everything he does screams what the Browns seem to like at that position. Fits the climate because he is big and strong. In addition to being fast, he's 26. You have your immediate answer at X. There's no more question of who's the number one at that point, or going forward, Ayuk is that guy. You have Jerry Jeudy, and you're loving life.
Yeah. So that's the dream, right? That was the dream for us, and it seems to. I mean, I don't. How realistic is that, really? I mean, do you think that the Browns are? So I don't. I mean, there's Brad Stainbrook's report out there. I don't know. I kind of felt like this thing was going to get done with Cooper at some point. Like both sides. There's not both sides would be kind of screwed without each other. Right? Like they have incentive to come together a little bit, right?
I think the biggest issue is already sorted out, which based on his reporting is the money. I mean, the fact that both sides are like, yeah, this is what it's going to cost. Boom. Now it's a question of years and guaranteed money. And Amari Cooper is aiming for exactly what I thought he wanted, which is 2 more years with guaranteed dollars. And at least right now, based on Brad's reporting, that the Browns are willing to offer a 1-year extension, but aren't inclined to offer him guaranteed money, which to me, if that is true, and I don't, who knows, if that's true, I wouldn't take that if I was Amari Cooper either, because you are essentially, yes, you get a small pay raise, but then you are right back in the same situation you were a year from now. You're not in free agency. You don't have that capability. If you have a bad year, the Browns can then cut you. And then you are at a reduced leverage position. And if you have another great year, you're right back into potentially skipping training mini camp, because you are going to then want to get the guaranteed money you didn't get the last time. So I totally understand why Amari Cooper doesn't like that deal. So I think the deal will get done. I think they will get sorted out. The Browns seem to have a weird sticking point around 2026. Which may or may not hold up. But I think at the very least, you can sign him for this year and 1 more with guaranteed and feel very good about it. If you want to add in more after that, maybe that's where you have sort of a team option or something like that. And maybe that is where the rubber meets the road. But at this point, I'm with Amari on what he's looking at, if what is reported is true. But as I said, I have every bit of confidence that this is going to get done because the major sticking point is over with. They know exactly how much they want to get paid. We're not going to be sitting here talking about, we're not going to have this conversation about Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk, clearly the 49ers are lowballing him money-wise, or at least that's the message he is sending. That's not the case with Amari Cooper. It's entirely about years and security.
Yeah. So I may have found a way to play our videos, Pete, while you were talking. So let's. You want to try this again?
Go for it.
All right. Let's see if we can sort this out. It may not be perfect, but let's see what we can do here. Try again. Apologize, folks. Live show. All right. So we got these fellas that do this show here. Now, can we get this one to play? Just had it playing. Well, one moment. If we could ever... All right. Can you hear that?
I see it. I don't hear anything. I know the Brown segment's the last one.
So, unable to hear that, Pete, apparently. So, I think there's a way that I can do this. If you give me one moment here. But so the other thing so you think if Cooper if the issue is years, what is the the breaking point for the Browns in negotiations? Like, what, you don't want to go into a third year of like guaranteed money, right? That's kind of like how I thought of it. I don't know what you think of it.
Yeah, my guess is that ultimately they're going to end up with the pay raise, one more year with guaranteed money, and then another option year. I'm sure that isn't the answer that Cooper wants, but that's probably where the best he's going to do in this situation. But keep in mind, there's still a little over a month until veterans report to training camp, which is July 23rd. And, like most things, deadlines tend to make deals. The Browns don't want to be messing around with this when they're with the Greenbrier and everything. They, based on how they've sort of approached this, I don't think they want to be in a situation where they're like day 8 at the Greenbrier and suddenly they're like wheeling in Amari Cooper signing a contract. I think they're either going to get it done beforehand, which is my expectation, or wait until the Greenbrier is completed before bring in Amari Cooper. But you have that much time. That's your biggest pending issue. They can do some stuff in terms of moving the money around, in terms of creating cap flexibility. The longer they extend that contract, which might give them some incentive to sort of meet him halfway. But, I don't think the Browns want to put themselves in a position where they are paying for a declining Amari Cooper. So that becomes sort of tricky for them. But like I said, I think they will figure it out. If they just give the extra year of guaranteed money, I think that will do it. But that's sort of the sticking point. And I get it. Like I said, I sympathize with Amari in that situation. I would be annoyed at that deal myself, and I'd be holding out for at least one more year with guaranteed money that's going to make sure I get paid if they cut or trade me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know who they have some leverage, right? But but if you overplay your hand or your demand is wildly, if you're, and I doubt that it will be, but if you're asking for something that you shouldn't be asking for, you can't command. The Browns can just stand put and what are you going to do? Sit out? You're not going to sit out, so you're going to play your final year on $20 million, right? I mean, so they both have a point where the leverage stops a little bit, right? I mean,
yes. I mean, there's no question that that if Amari asks for an obscene amount of money, which, like I said, seemingly has already been taken care of, the Browns are just be like, no, you're going to get $20 million, and we're going to, we'll go from there. Meanwhile, Cooper has leverage in that he had the best season of his career. He thrived with 4 different quarterbacks. And the Browns don't have an option at this point, unless there's some secret negotiation where the Browns are like slow playing this because they're trying to work out a deal with Ayuk, which I do not believe for a second is happening. But unless that's happening, they have limitations in terms of how much they can push. And I think Cooper has some leverage in the sense that I don't think the Browns want to be in a situation where he plays out this year and now we're talking about potentially the franchise tag with this type of thing, because I don't think it worked, or maybe the transition tag, because the reason that becomes a problem is it becomes really awkward in terms of how you structure your money. What they do not want to have to do is say, let's say, because I think that the franchise tag is only like 25 million or something like that, or somewhere in that neighborhood. The Browns don't want to be in a situation where they suddenly have to take all of the 25 million and sit it on their salary cap, because it gets in the way of so many other things. So, like I said, both sides have a little bit of leverage, but they only can go so far. And that's why it feels like both teams are nibbling a little bit at their edges as opposed to a giant impasse. But they've got to get this sorted out. They've got a month to do it. It should be fine. The other thing, not that I think Amari Cooper would somehow be less professional or, angry at the Browns during the season or anything, but I don't think I don't think the Browns want this unsettled into the year where, there's at least room for speculation that if Amari Cooper doesn't play well, it's because he's upset about his contract or whatever. So
yeah,
there's only so far both sides can go on, which is what I expected all along, which is why I've been pretty confident this was going to get done and relatively painless, which to this point it still is.
All right, so you want to try this one more time?
Go for it.
I apologize, folks. Please note recording. Yeah, settings to say that's nonsense. All right, so let's see if we can figure this out. Shared screen video stream. I'm just trying to see if there was a somehow some kind of an accidental mishap in the settings here, but I don't see one. So try to do this unconventionally again. I don't know how well it will work. Last time, no audio, but chat username he believes, and I appreciate that. So thank you. Let's try it one more time. If not, we'll move on to another topic, and I'll stop fiddling around here. Yep, I lost my Emmy. Thanks, Fumble. All right. Share. Let's go. Entire screen share system video. Now the question is how, once I get this going, will it... Instead, you're going to share the video from that tab. Got it.
AQ Shipley,
There you
Justin
go.
Pugh,
Yep.
Coach Jay Gruden. We're going to dive into some teams in the AFC.
They should pound the rock, and they just don't.
Don't even talk about him.
Pittsburgh's not going to deal with Russell Wilson. I promise you that.
Everything about their offense is structure.
Would you say lower? Higher. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
AFC North, you guys think this is the best division in football?
I'm biased. I played for a couple teams in there, and obviously you coached in that division. It's a different brand of football. It is, it's smash mouth. They know what November, December, January football looks like and what it's supposed to look like. And the Baltimore Ravens, I mean, they're just built to win. Harbaugh's fantastic. He preaches a certain brand of football, and they don't stray from the types of guys that they bring in. And they just went and got a guy that fits their brand as good as anybody, and that's Derrick Henry. And I'm excited to see what he can do behind
The football and be an athlete. There's times that you watch him play over the last several years where he is by far the best athlete on the field.
Not a very big guy.
No.
They went to the playoffs last year.
All right.
He's not a very big guy.
No.
They went to the playoffs last year.
All right. Yep.
Can they get back?
Sure. They get back at night.
I think it's
Down a stretch in big games. They can't make any plays. They changed coordinators in the middle of last year, and then finally they.
Higher or lower 1,000 yards receiving?
we saw that last year. And I'd be doing because we saw that.
Because they will.
Arthur Smith's quick things and then just everything off the run game, right? But if they can utilize the play action game and get Pickens deep shots, out route, I mean, he's got a chance to get there. I just don't think, it's lower. The more to get there, I just don't.
To me, just high level thinking the Browns, like this is DeShaun Watson's team. He has to stay healthy and he has to play good this year. I mean, everybody's just waiting and waiting and waiting, right? They got Jerry Jeudy in a trade. They've got some pretty good skill guys. Chubb's probably coming back from his injury. They're always pretty good up front. I mean, but just overall, DeShaun Watson's got to be the guy.
Has to be the guy. We've been waiting. We've been saying this for years now. We've been waiting for this. I mean, you have to wait as long as this contract is because it's fully guaranteed, right? And
Yeah.
so they have no choice but to do that. But when you're sitting here saying the best this team's looked is when Joe Flacco came off the couch in his 19th season, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
That is a bad thing, and that is where this team has been. So
How's that a bad thing? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
No. How is that a bad thing?
The thing with it is like, if you just look at like highlights and stuff, and don't get me wrong, if you just sort of watch the flow of some of those games, you would get the impression that Joe Flacco is better. But if you go like big picture, they're basically the same quarterback that season. They both put the ball in harm's way too often. They both throw the ball down the field a lot, and both were wildly inconsistent. Like, you can talk about how Joe Flacco was really great at some points. Like the Chicago Bears game is a great example. Joe Flacco was horrible for the first half. He basically gave away the game and then came back and won it. Like it just like DeShaun Watson, started to do against the Baltimore Ravens. Joe Flacco played against weaker competition, and DeShaun Watson got some easy games, and obviously had the Steelers game, whereas Flacco had the playoff game. And even though the playoff game, Flacco was keeping pace with the Houston Texans because the Browns defense was awful in that game. But ultimately the pick sixes are what they are. So I don't really care on that front. I mean, I think it becomes easy to say well, Joe Flacco looked better. And in some ways you can certainly make that case. But overall, I think if you're asking opponents who they'd rather face, I think they'd take Joe Flacco over Deshaun Watson. Now, some of that is based on potential, but I do think that if defenses are honest, Deshaun Watson is a bigger problem than Joe Flacco would be. And,
For sure.
I think Joe Flacco was very impressive in what he did. I also think Kevin Stefanski had a lot to do with that, which is obviously what the Browns are hoping for will finally translate with Deshaun Watson. My theory continues to be if Deshaun Watson just stays on the field, he will figure it out, staying healthy and all that stuff. But beyond that, I don't care. You can complain about that, but the problem is that ignores what the Browns have done in the offseason, which I think is going to be a theme throughout this video. Alex Van Pelt is not here. A lot of the coaching staff is not here. They brought in Ken Dorsey. They brought in Nick Charlton. They brought in Tommy Rees. They brought in Deuce Staley. And there are some points in here that I think are relevant, but overall, the Browns are trying to do as much as they can to benefit Deshaun Watson, but they're also just trying to benefit the offense in general. As we've talked about a lot on here, if you take Deshaun Watson out of the equation entirely and the Browns had stable quarterback play, I would still been here saying the Browns have real problems with the running game. The Browns have some real problems creating just easy plays. They have a effective offense that can work, but I do think they left meat on the bone in terms of what they're able to do. I think they wanted to evolve the offense to where the NFL is going. I think while the Browns offense has been effective, it was at risk of becoming stale. And I think the Browns wanted to change it before that happened. And as I've told you before on here, because of the fact that they had just changed their special teams coach and their defensive coordinator, they couldn't also change the offensive staff. But I think in some ways, and these coaches weren't available either. That's the other part about this. But I think in some ways, if the Browns had the opportunity to sort of go back in time and install this coaching staff a year previous, they would have. But obviously, Ken Dorsey was going to be the offensive coordinator of the Bills. Tommy Rees, Nick Saban hadn't retired, so Tommy Rees is the offensive coordinator at Alabama. Deuce Staley is the running backs coach because he wanted to go home in Carolina. I think the Browns wish they could have done this before, but it just sort of worked out in a way that they were able to get all these guys available this time around in this hiring cycle. But I do think they just want to have this offense advance. And the Mike Vrabel element of being sort of that game theory coach, of being able to sit there and go, here's what I would do to try to stop this, or this is what gives me problems, and being able to provide that immediate feedback as these guys are installing it is huge. And not for nothing, but beyond the Deshaun Watson element of this, we'll see how long it stays this way, but players seem to be excited about it. So there's a lot going on here. But my overarching point with all of this is the Browns had to do something about their running game. And I don't put that on a specific coach. Stump Mitchell basically came out and said, I cannot evolve. I cannot adapt. This is all I know. I don't think Alex Van Pelt was the guy who's going to be able to evolve. The one guy who I don't think cares, I think he could do anything, is Bill Callahan. But circumstances are what they are. He takes the job with his son, and the Browns bring in Andy Dickerson, who is an interesting fellow in his own right, has experience with Callahan and all these other things. So I think there's just a lot more involved with, Joe Flacco looked better than this, that, and the other thing. And, Jerry Jeudy's added to the mix. You've got a lot going on this side of the ball that could be potentially more explosive. We haven't seen him yet because he's been hurt and still recovering from the injury. But like Nyheim Hines is a really interesting potential player for this offense. Deontay Foreman will not be interesting without pads on. They may as well just send him home until they have pads on, because that's just what he is. He's going to run people over. So there's a lot of these parts where we don't know. And that's the other thing, like, other than basic installations and some really basic walkthroughs, you can't learn anything about the running game until guys have pads on.
No. All right, so we'll go back to this video. So just between me and you, Pete, I cannot hear you when this thing pauses, so I got to pull it down to hear you. So maybe we'll try to watch it most of the way through and then stop and react. How's that sound?
That's fine.
Okay. Let's do this again. Perseverance. We're going to get it. We're going to get it here. So, all right. Share visit. Click on that and share.
Until we get the DeShaun that we saw that was Magic Man in the playoffs for Houston a couple years ago. I mean, we're going on 6-7 years, I guess, now at this point. And who knows if Chubb's ever going to be the same. That was a gruesome knee injury. So will he ever be the same player that he was? Now he's the best in the league when he's healthy, but will he be the same?
Another one, second. He had one in college.
He had another one in college, exactly. And then they lost a lot of coaches too. They lost Van Pelt. They lost, their offensive line coach went down to Tennessee. They lost some guys. So who knows? I don't think this team's going to be able to compete in the AFC North. I don't.
All right, well, I think they win the AFC North. I think the Cleveland Browns win. They are my sleeper team in the NFL because of how they handle the money. They handle the money better than anybody in the league. Jimmy Haslam puts more talent on the field. If you look at like $10 million plus players, the Cleveland Browns have more of them than anyone else in football.
Yeah. I will beat your ass at Monopoly.
They went to the playoffs last year with Joe Flacco as their quarterback. They have to have talent. They have the best player on defense in the league, Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
They have one of the best defenses in the league. They just got our boy Jordan Hicks out there. He's going to be captaining that offense. You got Amari Cooper. Defense. Sorry, I got excited here. I got to deal with him. I'm trying to block him out. If DeShaun goes out there and he's healthy and can be even a 75% of what he was in Houston, they're winning the AFC North next year. They have two of the best guards in football, probably the best right guard in football in Wyatt Teller. Mm-hmm. I really like the Cleveland Browns. They got talent across the board. The defensive backs.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Thank you.
You can see the blank paper.
I think they come in last.
And they got Jameis Winston. They got Morale.
Schwartz was the defensive coordinator of the year, assistant of the year, I think. And they won head coach of the year. They did a great job last year. Quarterback for them. Now, he came down to earth against Houston in the playoffs. He threw a couple of bad picks, but he had a pretty good run, right? DeShaun has not done anything that can make anybody believe that he can get back to what he was at Houston. Show me one play. Show me one series, one drive. I haven't seen it yet. And he gets hurt again last year. So we're going to count on him to lead this offense without Nick Chubb. But if Nick Chubb is anywhere half of what he was, I'd be shocked. I mean, these injuries are tough for running backs. Jerome Ford's a good player, but it's a big difference, right? I just don't think that offense right there can go to Baltimore, play Baltimore twice and get yards, play Pittsburgh twice and get yards, play Cincinnati twice, maybe a couple yards, but it's going to be a grind for them, and I just don't think they can compete.
Yeah. My thing with DeShaun Watson, keeping on that theme, is that when you watch him play, even when he was in Houston, it's a lot of freestyle. It's a lot of not in rhythm, kind of scrambling, running around, throwing it deep, making plays, and he's talented and special at that. I played in this offense a little bit, at least in off-season, or tried to with a bum elbow, but Stefanski, Drew Petzing, everything about their offense is structure. It's rhythm. It's feet. It's timing, right? Those are all things that I don't describe.
Is there anybody's offense that's not important?
Well, it's all around tight end as one, and it's all about resetting your feet. It's not like there's not just a whole lot of, hey, scramble around and make plays, and if it's not there, like it's different. Like, and I know playing quarterback how DeShaun Watson feels comfortable. He feels comfortable finding 1 and 2 and then let's go make plays, right? The more he's been hurt, he's been banged up. He used to run around in Houston and
He's been publicly
and find
embarrassed.
We'll see week 1. Is he playing in rhythm? Is he seeing the field well? If he's not, I don't know if it's gonna go well.
Okay, so I don't know if Jay Gruden just said, "Hey, I was a Bengals coach. I know about the Bengals, so the Browns are bad," or he just sort of said, "Woof, there are 32 teams in this league. I'm not getting to all of them." But woof, that was brutal. Look, let's start with the defensive part, where he said they're starting to leak oil at the end of the year.
Yes.
There was a point where they were leaking oil, but it wasn't the end of the year, because the end of the year was Jets, where the Browns blew the doors off the Jets and then sort of let them get some pity touchdowns. Houston Texans, where the Browns destroyed them, put in their backups, and gave up 2 quick touchdowns and had to put their starters back in. Like, if you're complaining about the defense, you're looking at the Rams. You're looking at sort of the Broncos a little bit, and then obviously the Houston Texans. But in general, they were wire to wire the best team on defense. Now, as I've said, I think the Browns could easily be not the number 1 defense and be better than they were last year. And I look at the talent they've added to that side of the ball. The Browns were not satisfied with what they had. They could have just run it back entirely, and they ran back a lot of it. But they said, we want more on the defensive line. They signed Quentin Jefferson, who's even more specialized than what they had before in Jordan Elliott. They added Mike Hall, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's so hard to guess because he's young. You're hearing a lot of good things from players in terms of work ethic and stuff, but they don't have pads on. So let's not put the cart before the horse there. But even if he's like not giving them anything, they're going to be really good up front, and they're going to have talent. They're in the second year of this defense, which I found really interesting listening to guys talk about this, particularly Dalvin Tomlinson talking about how big of a difference that, like, he found his comfort zone sort of week 10, week 8 to 10, week 10 notably being the Ravens game, that it was a bigger adjustment than maybe they anticipated playing in this defensive scheme. And then they got more into it. We're hearing about, all the curveballs, change-ups, whatever the hell you want.
Yeah,
or you're hearing
the baseball
like
analogies.
Yeah, you're hearing like Efren Bandit, the safeties coach, who did a really good job in his first year, talk about, getting to starting in chapter 10 and 12, as opposed to starting in chapter 1. Like all these things are really good. And just looking at the safety position, Juan Thornhill had a miserable year because of his calf.
Yeah.
I think he will be dramatically improved if he just regresses to his mean.
Yeah.
Grant Delpit missed time. It had the story of Grant Delpit so far in his career. He has had outstanding halves of seasons where he's like absolutely dominant for half a year, and then something happens. In this case, another guy got hurt. Rodney McLeod misses most of the year with the bicep injury. Like when the Browns started leaking oil, they had Ronnie Hickman and DeAnthony Bell and Deron Harmon playing safety. They lost Okoronkwo. They lost Maurice Hurst. Like, there's a reason that like you could point to and go, oh, these all things happen. Myles Garrett's shoulder gets hurt against the Denver Broncos. Like, and they've got to sort of avoid those catastrophic injuries this year. Like, God forbid they have somebody who's like a key piece suffer a more impactful injury than they had. But like, particularly at the end of the year, like every week, it seems like somebody else going down. That was like the story of the season. So there's a lot of reasons I think this defense will be better, even if it's not necessarily reflected in the statistics, because they're going to play better quarterbacks, and that will be a real challenge. But they've got what I would say is earned confidence based on last year. And now it becomes, what are the adjustments like? What are those new things they're incorporating in addition to the strength they already had? Because that could allow them to take them to the next level. That's one side of the ball. Offensively, Nick Chubb I have no idea. It's the most legitimate question anybody can answer. But him and Watson, those are legitimate questions. And I think Colt McCoy does make some good points about what DeShaun needs to look like. I don't agree with the idea that Kevin Stefanski's offense doesn't allow you to create after plays, I think, or extend plays, because we've seen it. We've seen Baker Mayfield extend plays. We saw Joe Flacco extend plays last year. We saw DeShaun Watson extend plays like that. I don't buy the idea that this offense is sort of counter to that. What I would suggest is that Kevin Stefanski's offense provides answers and a means to not have to do that, which is key. Go ahead.
What's McCoy's? He played under Petzing, right?
Yes.
In Arizona. Is that his? Is that what he's referencing? He played in the system. Okay, go ahead.
So I agree with him that for the things where the Browns are going to go, catch, step, throw, or 3-step and throw, like DeShaun Watson does need to be better at those things. Like I'm not going to argue with that because, and I don't think DeShaun would argue with that. I don't think Quincy Avery would argue with that. Like that needs to come out better. Like, yes, there are going to be areas where you're just like, it doesn't come out right. And you got to sort of get over it. Again, the Ravens game's a perfect example of that. But like, and you got away with that in that game where he starts 1 of 5 with a pick 6. Like that will happen. But what I would like to see from DeShaun, and this is something that he sort of touched on himself, is he's a late starter. Well, I would like to see the Browns with DeShaun go right down the field and score. Like Kevin Stefanski's really good at that stuff. And we've seen it with quarterback after quarterback after quarterback.
The scripted plays.
Yeah, like he's got a real gift for it. And I would like to see DeShaun Watson take that next step. Now, I feel between what I'm seeing, I resist getting on like Twitter and going, well, DeShaun Watson looks great because of X. I'll tell you what I am looking at. I do look at sort of the compact throwing motion that feels like it's right. And the thing I'm looking at mostly, and I think because I don't have it really anything to compare. I think his feet are quicker than they have been in past years, just in terms of getting to his throws and then being able to sort of move off of them. Because when he came back initially off the suspension, like that was a real issue for him. His feet were slow. And I think he really worked hard to get back that. Now, I can't say that verifiably, but just looking at his feet, I think they look right relative to what he needs to be able to do these things. So I do think there are real questions about that happening. Now, with the coaching staff they have in place, with Stefanski, with Dorsey, with all these guys that they brought in, with DeShaun just hopefully feeling confident, I do feel like they're going to be better at that stuff. It's got to happen. But to look at this team and think they are a 4th place team, and this is not the only place I've heard this, is insane. And you made the exact same stupid mistake last year. And at least last year I could sort of, fold it in and go, well, they don't want to see DeShaun succeed. They don't want to be looking like they're sort of promoting him to be successful. So they pick him to go 4th, and then, oh, holy crap, they finished 2nd and have not, if DeShaun Watson doesn't get hurt and go out for the season when he does, on top of all the other injuries, like at that point in time, everybody in Cleveland for it, 12 sweet hours, was thinking we can make a run at the division. We can make a run at the division. And then we found out he's out for the season. Like, so what happened? Now, again, Nick Chubb, part of this is real. Like, but they did that without him. And I don't know what he's going to be able to do, but they won 11 games without him. Other than that, they are better at every position for the most part, other than like tight end. Like Harrison Bryant is better than what they had behind David Njoku last year. But every other position, even quarterback, is better this time than it was at this time than it was last year. So other than, oops, we forgot how to play football, or everybody else figured out what the Browns are doing and they're going to beat them at it, I don't know how you come to that conclusion. I can point to far more concerning weaknesses for 2 of the other teams. I can do it for all 3. Yeah. I just feel good about the Ravens overall, just because they have Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh is a good coach.
Yeah, the thing that struck me the most, and like, boy, that's just like really off of like, even the people and the most, prudent detractors of the Browns, right, wouldn't come out and proclaim that they can't compete in the AFC North. Like that just feels like a like I don't AQ Shipley says it, and then Jay Gruden says he agrees with them that they can't compete with the other three teams in the AFC North. That just feels like a wild miss. I don't know, like, and then pointing to Joe Flacco as the reason why, or that somehow shows that that just shows that they can compete with a lesser quarterback. You know what I mean? Like if you get anything above that kind of play, they're like talking out of both sides of their mouth, kind of, right? Like making that point only helps the point that they have the talent to be able to do it with a guy like Flacco.
And look, there are mitigating circumstances in some weird situations that happened, but PJ Walker had 2 game-winning drives last year, and DTR had 1. Like, they got 3 wins out of those guys. I mean, if you can do that with this team, it says a lot about you. And one of those game-winning drives was against the eventual Super Bowl representative from the NFC. They have whatever you want to say about the Browns. And look, every season's different. I get it. But the Browns have real pelts. Like they have real things you can look at and go, wow, that was impressive.
Yeah.
Beating the 49ers with PJ Walker was incredible. And what the Browns defense did to that offense was outstanding. Like, I am blown away by what San Francisco's quarterback was able to do in the NFC playoffs, particularly against the Green Bay Packers. He after that Browns game, at that moment in time when everybody thought the 49ers were the best team in the league, everybody went right back to the questions they had about him being a top-tier quarterback. Is he really that good? Because the Browns were relentlessly in his face. The 49ers offensive line is not great outside of Trent Williams, who's, an immortal. But they did that. They beat a more than legitimate Ravens team that makes the AFC Championship. They beat a lot of good football teams. They beat the Steelers with DTR. And there are reasons I believe the Steelers will be better this year. I still don't know what the hell they're going to do on 3rd and 10. But I think their defense is going to be better this year. I like the direction it's going offensively, particularly what they did on the offensive line. I still feel like it's a year away. And maybe those guys come out and they're all great. The fact that they've got 2 rookies and a second-year guy who are all going to be fixtures on that line. Like, you are asking potentially Fatnu and Broderick Jones to block the Browns' edge rushers. You are asking potentially a rookie center to block Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris and, Quentin Jefferson and potentially Mike Hall. That is no joke. Whatever you want to say about, they could be maulers eventually in run blocking, but those are real problems. And they've got 2 quarterbacks who hold onto the ball. The 2 quarterbacks who held onto the ball the longest last season are now behind this line, a team that has traditionally gotten the ball out of their hands as fast as humanly possible. The Bengals. I think the Bengals pass defense is going to be pretty good. I don't know what they're going to do to stop the run. I don't.
Right.
And the AFC North, where everybody is set up to pound the football, I don't know that they have an answer to that. Joe Burrow is phenomenal. But right now, you're not asking the question about is he going to be good if he stays healthy, but you are asking, is he going to stay healthy? Because he's just had this happen again and again and again. And, that made, every time you hear about it, like the wrist injury sounds like a bigger deal than they're letting on with it. And even his doctor was like worried about it. So I don't know what's going to happen with them. I don't know what's going to happen with T. Higgins. Is he going to be upset during the season? I tend to doubt it. I'm sure I expect he will be fine. I expect Trey Hendrickson will ultimately be fine. But it just speaks to the amount of things going on in the Bengals that are of at least concern with them. And are they going to be able to run the ball at all? I have no idea. So, and then the Ravens, I think the Ravens will be fine. Their edge rushers are still a gigantic question mark, and they're replacing 3 offensive linemen. And they may be the right moves, but you've got to protect Lamar Jackson first and foremost. And then 2, Lamar Jackson can do a lot of things to mess with the defense, but Derrick Henry is a guy that needs to have blocks. Like, they need to be able to move guys off the ball. And if they can't, that could be a real problem for them. The fact that they are, integrating these new guys. And and maybe it's a thing where halfway into the season, we're not even worried about it anymore. But those are big questions, and the Ravens feel confident. Maybe they're right. But, like, those are vulnerabilities against an AFC North where every single team they will play twice has a premier pass rusher, at least one, if not multiple. So there's just a lot of questions there, questions that I don't think the Browns have to answer. Like, I've said this before, right this second, the Browns have the best roster in this division. It's not even close. Yeah. And if, to Justin Pugh's point, if you get 75% DeShaun Watson, they should win the division. Like,
I agree.
That's it. So, what percentage of DeShaun Watson we get? Who knows? Are the Browns going to stay healthy this year? I don't know. But I don't, certainly there's a scenario where the Browns don't make the playoffs. It's just that brutal. But 4th, I just don't see it.
Yeah. Kind of in AQ Shipley, I don't know where that came from. I don't know. It's strange. I've not heard anybody, just say, they can't compete. Like, you could even say you thought they were going to finish 4th because it's like the best division of football, but to say they can't compete just seems like a far cry from the truth. All right, let me try this real quick. Yeah. All right, sweet. So we are going to go to some more Amari Cooper here as I get this video ready. So we'll set up this video. This is, of course, PFT. This is from a couple days ago, but it's pretty good as they talk about, both sides, of this thing. As you look at this thing via the Browns and sorry. Well, that doesn't want to work either. We got all kinds of problems tonight, Pete.
Well, the one point I would make on Amari Cooper is this idea that, like, by acquiring Jerry Jeudy, that, like, that should piss off Amari Cooper. That gave him more leverage. I expect when Jerry Jeudy's extension was announced, Amari Cooper's agent fist pumped because he knew exactly what that meant for him. I think there was an inevitability to this anyway, but, like, at that point, it becomes very easy to go, he's getting $17 million a year. My guy's getting 20, and he had 1,250 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's got, like, 3,400 yards and 14 touchdowns in the 2 seasons he's been here. Jerry Jeudy hasn't gotten 1,000 yards, and I understand the Browns are betting on Jerry Jeudy's future, but it becomes very easy for the agent to go, I mean, come on, this is obvious. If anything, it wouldn't surprise me if Amari Cooper is thrilled. And when this contract's ultimately signed, one of the first people he hugs or whatever is Jerry Jeudy for showing up and giving him all that extra ability to maneuver his contract.
Yeah. Can you hear that? The audio?
Nope.
Yeah, so everything failing tonight. So basically, PFT, they talk about both sides of things. The Jerry Jeudy thing, as you mentioned, a lot of people's rhetoric, to your point, is that, hey, the Browns brought in, his successor. We heard this last week on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, right? They brought in his successor and signed him right in front of him. But he's not really a successor, right? Like, he's not the same. I don't think they expect Jerry Jeudy to be their one in the future. Do you?
No, the only thing I would say is that if Cedric Tillman is what they think he is, it gives you an avenue not to need a true, X for your offense to function. In other words, Jerry Jeudy and somebody else could be more the primary threats at that point. and Cedric Tillman just becomes a high functioning, a good X, but he doesn't necessarily need to be the focal point of the passing game. He can do all the things that you need that position to do, but that they can have guys who either thrive from the slot like Jerry Jeudy does. They still have David Njoku. Like, I would say that I don't view Jerry Jeudy as a number one, but I also don't think that like they're entirely hamstrung to having to do certain things so long as Cedric Tillman takes the step that they believe, or I believe in many ways that he's going to take this year and these next 2 years. I think, which has always been my theory, was that Cedric Tillman, is here to eventually become the replacement for Amari Cooper, unless they can find somebody who's going to be that big time receiver that they can bring in either by trade, draft, or whatever, but that Cedric Tillman gives them that very stable piece that allows them to sort of play with everything else however they want.
He was kind of, I just wrote about it, but, Tillman supposedly had a really good offseason. Coach talked about him being in attendance every day. He did look physically stronger in his upper body, right? And yeah, he did. And he, they talked about him expanding his route tree a little bit because he came from an offense they didn't really have to have a very in-depth route tree. Not that we saw a ton of that, but did any of that stuff that you noticed? And what if he were, the two-part question, that question, anything you noticed from the clips that we saw about him? And then, Watson spoke highly of him too. But then if he were to take a huge jump, Pete, is there any way that they would look to move off of Elijah Moore? I pray not. This was a idea that was implanted in my head by the one and only Jack Duffin. Do you agree that they would try to move him if they thought Tillman was taking a huge step forward?
No, because they do completely different things. Elijah Moore certainly could play on the outside, and Cedric Tillman can play on the inside, but ultimately,
right.
Cedric Tillman is a vertical route tree, longer route. He's not an agile guy. Like, he's not a quick cut. He's more of a power receiver, sort of in the vein of DK Metcalf. Not as big, obviously, but just sort of that style of guy where you're not asking him to constantly, make dynamic cuts.
Yeah.
Like, that will likely always be a weakness for Cedric Tillman. That's part of the reason he was available in round 3, even though he was sort of the best X of that draft class. But here's the thing with Cedric Tillman. He was not too slow, too small, or too weak last year. He had NFL strength. He had real speed. He had legitimate size. All of it for him, and he produced in some ways. He got when they got him the ball, he looked like a tight end dragging tacklers around. For him, it's one, he's going to continue to fill out his frame and all that good stuff, but he's just got to get the nuances of the NFL, which he was never going to get at Tennessee. Yes, he could beat coverage. He could, do what they asked him to do and do that at a really high level. Strong hands, powerful guy, enough of a threat vertically to make things interesting. But that's where I sort of look at a guy compare to him against Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has the quickness to do the other things. Amari Cooper has all of the requisite ability to be a full service X. But Tillman could theoretically be a vertical based route tree guy, extend drives, body guys out for jump balls or plays in the red zone. But also when he goes in straight lines, he just runs, sort of drag and sail type routes and just breaking routes. He's just big. He is problematic. And, he almost got that touchdown against the Broncos, just running through people. So there's a verifiable skill set, but so he and Elijah Moore are incompatible in that sense. And I mean, Cedric Tillman's sort of a great fit for the Browns receivers. So they love those 200-pound plus guys. 6 foot plus strength, a game that sort of is built for all climates. Certainly, works in the AFC North and those type of things. But I have no incentive for the Browns to move off of Elijah Moore. I continue to believe Elijah Moore could have a very good season for the Browns. I don't know what that means numbers-wise, just by virtue of how many guys they have. But he just gets open. He consistently gets open. Now, he's got to help himself out in terms of making sure he catches the ball all the time. There's some other things. But, like, when Amari Cooper was out and he had to be the number one, he looked good against the Rams. He looked good against the Jets until he got beheaded. So he can do a lot of things. And now when you're talking about, like, potentially having an offensive set where you've got Moore, Judy, Cooper, and Njoku, or throw Tillman in there too, like, you have a ton of options out of an empty set. And that's not including running backs like Jerome Ford, who can be a weapon as a receiver, or Nyheim Hines, or whatever. But, like, that's a lot of problematic matchups that you give the opponent. How are they going to cover all these guys? What does that do for DeShaun Watson, who wants to push the ball downfield? But I continue to be bullish on Elijah Moore. And that may not translate into another contract here. I mean, he may just play himself out of the Browns and get a bigger contract elsewhere. That's going to happen. The Browns are going to be that team at some point. They can't keep everybody. And some guys are going to leave, and hopefully we're going to start rolling in some of those comp picks to bolster the draft in addition to everything else they're doing. But yeah, I mean, I think Tillman is I think people who are, like, down on him initially were silly. And I'm not going to deny the issues he had, but he's a rookie. He was good enough that the Browns felt comfortable trading Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like, that was one of the major reasons they did it, was because they thought Tillman was impressing enough that they felt like they had to get him on the field. They wanted to see what he could do. And there are things that he has to get better at, but I think with a full off season and just focusing on those things, I expect he's going to have a stronger year. But realistically, it's his third year that we're really worried about. And that's not to say I don't think Cedric Tillman's going to contribute this year. I think he will. But when they really need him to sort of step up, is going to be year 3.
Yeah. It's going to be sad. I'm big Elijah Moore fan. I wish that there's a way that he could stick around, but that feels far-fetched, right? To give him an extension. Like you said, at that point, if you were to find a way to give him an extension, at that point, are you just blocking your young players from getting reps?
It would tell you that they do not feel good about who they have behind him. Like, that would be, if they are carrying Judy and Cooper and Moore at that point, that would make you feel like we don't feel good about it. Now, what they would like to see, and the guy who more naturally projects to the role Elijah Moore has, is Jamari Thrash. And maybe David Bell to a certain point, even though his body type's the opposite. He's more of a power slot. But Jamari Thrash does the things that Elijah Moore would naturally do and has a little bit more inside-outside versatility. But, like, if he, and what I've seen from him, like, for a guy who barely got into the league, and there's no pads and all that, but he understood how to get open. He understood he did not look out of place by any stretch. Now, does that mean he's going to be great? No, but he at least looked like he had enough of a foundation where you're sitting there going, okay, yeah, I want to see what he can do. If he can grow, and Cedric Tillman can grow, and David Bell can grow or not, I mean, they only really need 2 of the 3 to sort of figure something out, then it's going to make them feel better about that, because then it becomes cost savings. It becomes another opportunity for them to add somewhere else. Unless Elijah Moore gets in some very strange contract hole where the money is just too good to bring him back. Otherwise, he either had an awful season, like he had a season-ending injury, or it was just horrendous, and the Browns can get him back super cheap, or he's likely to end up somewhere else.
Yeah, unfortunately, in my eyes. But, so that's interesting. Anyway, touch on this one more time, because the video that we're missing, that we did miss, was about Cooper. And we've already talked about a lot of the leverage and points from both sides. And like you said, you think the money What do you think the money is at? They said that, or you said kind of the reporting that we have is that the money is right. They're trying to work out the years, right? So, what do you think the money he would ask for? I always kind of felt like 25 would be the number, but I hear people saying all kinds of crazy numbers.
I suspect it's somewhere around 23, 24.
Yeah.
He may ask for 25. I just don't know if they'll get it.
Yeah.
Because, again, his leverage goes so far. He can't, there's only, the Browns can sort of say, yeah, we recognize that you've been great. You've been everything we wanted you to be. But we're also, 20 million is not bad, especially, the more guaranteed money he's looking for, the easier it is for the Browns to sort of take money off the front. And I don't think he's going to be interested in that. So I think they're going to settle in right at that 23, 24 area.
And, so, and then you want to have, if you're the Browns, you want to have it out, right, as he gets into age 33. Although we both think that because he's such a route technician, he could age well into the game. But anybody at that age, you don't want to be really locked into for a ton of money, right?
No, I think the Browns want to keep the Browns love to keep their options open in general. They've got a couple guys in that age range that are going to come off the books at a certain time. So I think in some ways they might be inclined to sort of match up his contract with sort of the Bitonio and Teller contracts maybe. But yeah, they want to be able to sort of, maneuver how they want, and they don't want to be locked into a guy that can't play or, just diminished enough that the contract becomes unwieldy. Because I think if he stays healthy, Cooper's he's going to sustain. The worry you have is that he suffers a major injury at that age, and then you're sort of like, uh-oh, because that becomes more difficult the older you get.
All right, so the other video that we're not going to get to before we get to our last video, which I believe I can show the same way, and I'll probably stop it every, couple minutes here about as we do the Andrew Berry on NFL with the NFL Insiders, I believe is the name of the show, but it's Ian Rappaport and those guys on NFL Network, and Andrew Berry stopped by and talked to them for a little bit. But the other news is that the Browns and the rest of the AFC North will be the focus of the in-season Hard Knocks series. Have you watched much of the in-season Hard Knocks in the past, Pete?
I watched the Dolphins last year, but I have no idea what to expect when you have 4 teams. Either it's going to be very week to week on which team they're really focusing on, or 2 teams or whatever, or the episodes are going to be about 3 hours long. But it's really difficult. It's difficult to imagine that they are going to be able to do all 4 teams really in a given week. And what they may do, particularly since it starts airing in December, is just really focus on the division matchups, because obviously the Browns play all 3 road games in that month. So it becomes easy for them to sort of look at both teams sort of looking at the same game. Or the other option is they don't, for that exact reason. I have no idea what to expect. What I do know is I hated the 2018 Hard Knocks, and the mention of the Browns being put back into this thing made me angry because I hate Hugh Jackson with a passion. And I use the word hate, hate's a strong word, and that's why I'm using it. I don't think Hugh Jackson should ever be allowed to coach children again, or players of any kind, after what he did to DeShaun Watson. The 2018 Hard Knocks, all these people have like these cute and fuzzy memories. It was a joke. The guy looked completely ill-equipped to do anything. He made like people from accounting and like travel and all these other people jump in the lake with him. His pants fall down, which is sort of like his coaching career, his coaching tenure in a nutshell. He does the whole driving the bus BS. He, he has these conversations with Baker Mayfield that make no sense. That also reminded me of the fact that like all these people who want to revisit history. Well, if the Browns had drafted Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield didn't get any reps with the ones. It's all with the twos, and then suddenly he's the starter. Like,
Yep.
Hugh Jackson was just so bad as a coach. I felt so bad for the HBCUs he coached for, because my immediate reaction would be like, I want to throw myself in the way of anyone sending their children to play for this man, because he's genuinely an idiot. And he was psychotic in terms of, he's like George Allen without the talent, in terms of being so neurotic and afraid of everything, that he was watching. You watch the assistant coaches' press conferences to make sure they weren't saying the wrong thing about him or all this other stuff. Like, it was utterly ridiculous that they hired him and that they kept with him as long as they did. But like, and that made the Browns organization look like a giant train wreck. So like, my initial reaction to the Browns being in 2024, one, I still don't want to see it, because when I watched I still don't want them to be on it, because watching 2018, I remember thinking the whole time, I want to watch this. I want no one else to be able to see it. But like, I think the biggest winner right out of the gate is going to be the comparison between the organization in 2024 versus the organization in 2018. Like, it should look like a professional football team, because it is one. It's going to look like it, things make sense. And obviously the risk here is the season goes to crap. The Browns aren't good, and suddenly they're stuck on Hard Knocks, and that's obviously the risk for any of these teams. But like, we'll see what it looks like. I mean, obviously there are clearly storylines they're going to have worked themselves out. Now it'll be interesting, because like, from the Browns standpoint, most of them may have sorted themselves out, or hopefully, like, if DeShaun Watson is playing well, then that sort of goes away
by December.
If Nick Chubb is back and playing well, that one sort of answers itself. But obviously new ones will present themselves. Hopefully it's like, hey, the Browns are leading the division. Can they, finish it? Can they get the number one seed? All that stuff. But it's going to be interesting, because like, Tomlin and Harbaugh are such these dynamic guys, presences as coaches, and then Kevin Stefanski, who I think is a phenomenal coach, just isn't that guy. I mean, I think in some ways it'll be good for him, because I think for most people, despite the fact he's won 2 Coach of the Year awards, he's relatively anonymous. Outside of Cleveland, I don't think most people know who he is. He sort of looks like standard generic head coach in the NFL. I don't think it's all that different from LaFleur and Green Bay. I think they're sort of occupying that space. Although I think, like Stefanski, I think LaFleur is a terrific head coach. But they're just sort of, they aren't clip guys. They aren't make news guys. They're just sort of, we're going to do our thing. Guys. I'm not going to answer anything I'm not going to make a tirade. I'm not a huge personality. I want the play to do the talking, all that stuff.
Yeah. So my immediate thought was a chance for, to your point, a chance for some redemption from 2018, right? Like, they can kind of, and symbolically, like, the one good, sort of good moment from 2018's Hard Knocks was, the Jarvis Landry moment, right?
Was it?
Shit's contagious, Pete.
Was it a good moment? Because I had to live with that for 4 years, because Jarvis Landry gave one speech in front of cameras, in front of a garbage receiver room. And like that now people want to put him in like the Phil Dawson was announced to the legend class. I'm sure there's people who think Jarvis Landry should go in there. Despite the fact,
would you argue that Landry wasn't a part of the shift in the Browns culture? Not that moment necessarily, but himself.
I do, but what always irritated me is everybody just made it him. Like, there were a lot of guys who put a lot of hard work into that, and it genuinely irritated them that like this is how people viewed it. That like Jarvis Landry came in and did the whole thing, because that's not how that works. And the current Browns are a great illustration of that. Kevin Stefanski, when he got here, like I saw this last year with people who are like, oh, Jim Schwartz is the source to the coaching chair. It's not. Like, they've been doing this for years. Like, starting the pandemic, like Kevin Stefanski made this big point of like empowering players and giving them more of a voice and all these other things. And like, it built up. It took time. And then you saw this last year. Jim Schwartz is a hell of a coach, and I don't doubt that he helped in a number of ways. But like to ignore those things was idiotic. But like you go back to 2018, there were a whole lot of guys on that team that had been doing this kind of work. Joe Bitonio is a borderline Hall of Famer, for God's sake. He'd been there. J.C. Treader becomes the NFLPA president. He's obviously a leader. There were a lot of guys. Chris Kirksey at that point, I think, is still on the team. Who's like will never get as much due outside, like to fans than anyone else, as much as he was like revered in the building. There's just a lot of work that was going on. And then to like boil it down to that, I mean, in one way, it sort of like encapsulates what everybody was trying to do at that point, but it also like just diminishes everybody else's contributions because one guy, unless it's a quarterback, one guy cannot fix your whole franchise. As I said, CJ Stroud is phenomenal. If CJ Stroud is in Carolina, he's a dumpster fire. Like maybe they're slightly better than they were, but there's no way he's single-handedly overcoming that. There's so many things that have to come together. So I always hated that for that, even though Jarvis Landry was a fine receiver. And that's the other part, is because he gave us this clip, everybody elevated what he was doing on the field, which was, I think he had one 100-yard game in his entire tenure or something like that. It was like Amari Cooper has easily blown that away.
He had one really good season with the Browns.
He had more last season than he had his whole career. Like it just became this like unending thing. It was sort of like the thing with Phil Dawson. Like Phil Dawson absolutely deserves to be in the Legends Club. On the other hand, I hate the fact, and I'm sure Phil Dawson hates the fact, that he was the face of the franchise for 13 years because it means they sucked. Like, I'm sure Phil Dawson was sitting here. Yeah, man, I had a great run in Cleveland. He made 2 Pro Bowls in his entire career. One of them was with the Browns, and he's the long-standing guy from that. Other than sort of when Joe Thomas was added, it tells you that the Browns were bad and not so that stuff just irritates the crap out of me. Because it oversimplifies it. And don't get me wrong, I understand why Hard Knocks does it because that stuff works. Like it clearly works. People get excited about it. So it's cool from that standpoint. And I don't, even though I have done it quite often, I don't mean to tear down Jarvis Landry in this regard. But he was a good receiver. He was not the legend that people wanted him to be. Not single-handedly change the culture. He was a good player. He absolutely helped in a number of ways, to the point where David Njoku is saying, I want to take what Jarvis Landry was doing and keep it going. Like that in itself is a testament to what Jarvis Landry did. And a genuinely incredible thing that the Browns, that David Njoku was so touched by this, they decided, I'm going to do this with the softball game, with all the other stuff, with him being a leader in the locker room. Like that is genuinely incredible. But there are a lot of guys in the building that were part of it and will never get the credit because of that. Like the perfect example to me is the Myles Garrett helmet game against the Steelers. So all those guys go in the locker room, all this stuff's going down. It was Joe Bitonio that addressed the team. He was the guy who got it, but there's no camera there. Like, that's where you sort of lose those things and those moments. And, at some point, maybe that will get fleshed out in a book or some, lengthy article, but it was Bitonio that was the guy that everybody looked to in that moment. He's the guy who addressed the team. And that was a pivotal moment. Like, as opposed to, and I'm not accusing Jarvis Landry of rehearsing that, although I assume it was a little bit, but this was in the heat of the moment. Like, this is happening. Who do you look to? Boom. Joe Bitonio up in front. And that's where it drove me insane that like people are talking about all this stuff being like, well, Jarvis Landry's got the clip. Joe Bitonio needed a camera crew in that moment. Now I assume what he said was probably not safe for a camera crew, but nevertheless, that's what gets lost in sort of like trying to attribute to one avatar all of the things that the team has done.
Yeah, you're right. It does take away from a lot of stuff, but as a symbolic moment, I guess.
Yeah, like
right.
it's the most positive moment of that series. Like,
Yeah.
but it's the one thing anybody remembers that was good. Everything else was dumpster fire.
Absolutely right. Do you think, going back one more time, question about the 18 series, do you think that Freddie Kitchens ever gets hired if that's not on TV where he calls out Hugh and all that stuff?
I don't think that ended up having to do with it. I think it made it easier for fans to sort of be like, all right, Freddie Kitchens, cool. The quarterback likes him, all this other stuff. But I never thought of it in terms of this is why he got hired, because I don't think the Browns front office and ownership was sitting there going, oh, let's play that back. Like, I don't think they were obsessed with it. But I think it may have been helpful for the fan base.
Yeah, it felt like, he was a likable guy in the fan base.
He is a likable guy. Like, straight up, Freddie Kitchens is a very nice guy. Like, he is very engaging.
Great guy.
He's just not a head coach.
Yeah. And but that moment endeared him to the fan base, which ultimately made it easier for them to make that hire, which probably should have never been made, right? So
clearly.
Interesting. But yeah, so the other interesting aspect of the Hard Knocks thing, I want to see Russell Wilson try to interact in the Steelers locker room, right?
There's a lot that could go wrong for the Steelers with Hard Knocks. Like,
I want to see that.
There's a lot of potential disaster, because if they are not, like, they could still win games because they've obviously done it with mediocre quarterback situations. But if that thing is fully blowing up, Mike Tomlin is not going to be a happy man seeing cameras in the building and Russell Wilson sort of like, Steelers ride or whatever contrived crap he's got, or all the other weird stuff he might say, or what Justin Fields might say, or like,
come on, guys,
because the first place I'd stick a camera, the quarterback meeting room. Done. Immediately. That would be the show for me. One, I don't have to see the Browns at that point. Then two, I literally just want to see every interaction. That's the show. That should be its own Hard Knocks. Just Hard Knocks.
Yes.
Position meeting room quarterbacks.
Yeah, like that's what they should have done for the offseason Hard Knocks too, because I just want to see him try to pull that kind of crap. Like, come on, guys, yell pass, run. Him doing calisthenics on the plane, like all the bull crap, all the douchebaggery that he's known for in that locker room. That is so like, the cultured Steelers locker room. I just want to see how it goes down.
Well, if you believe some people in that locker room, namely their running back, Najee Harris, they don't have a culture. They have a lot of issues. And he was not afraid to say that they were basically children on that football team. And he's right. That don't know what it takes to be professionals, problems the Browns dealt with defensively the last couple of years and now have fixed. But those are real questions for them. Is George Pickens going to be a knucklehead? Is Cam Hayward at some point during Hard Knocks going to say, screw this, I'm going to Cleveland? I don't know, but those are things where I'm interested to see what that's like. I'm curious to see how much time we spend under the overpass at the Bengals facility, all that stuff.
Yeah. I get the whole thing, the Ohio family thing. Like, what would possess Cam Hayward to do that though? Like, what a slap in the face to kind of the Steelers to even just like threaten that or lightly just roll it out there as a minor threat that he would go to the Browns.
He wants a new contract. What better way to – it's not for the organization. That is entirely to get Steelers fans riled up and go, you can't let this guy go to Cleveland. All that, it could go one of two ways. You could either have people go, screw Cam Hayward, even though he's like going to end up in the Hall of Fame and after his entire career. But more than likely, you could get people like, stop being cheap and pay one of your legends to keep going. There's more reason for the Steelers to be worried about their organization in terms of paying money than the Browns. There's already Steelers questions about the willingness of ownership to invest in the facilities and stuff like that, because the guys who have inherited teams don't have the extra money to do a lot of those type of things. So like they do those report cards, and the Steelers ownership gets an F for willingness to like keep investing in the team and those things. So that part's interesting. So yeah, and then we'll see. I'm sure there will be interesting storylines with the Ravens. But I don't know what that will be. I mean, maybe Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson is always going to be a big time story, but there's a lot going on with that team as well. So it like I said, I'm very curious to see how it works out. My suspicion, and we'll see if I'm right, is it ends up really being a focus on basically 2 teams per week, or maybe after the first episode they do all 4. But like they're going to emphasize 2 teams potentially matched up against each other and really hammer in on that. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to tell stories the way Hard Knocks wants to tell stories when you're potentially like spending 13 minutes on each team.
Yeah, I think probably, to your point, like after the introductory, base, character, just whatever they lay down at the start of that, and whatever narratives are going on with the teams in December, it probably veers towards the teams that are trying to win the division more than anything, right? So if you have say you have a Steelers team that's really struggled and they're out of it, they're probably less in the show, right, than the other teams that are competing for the division. That's what I would think, probably how it gets geared up. But so they did the Dolphins last year, and they did one other in-season. Who was it the year before? Do you remember?
The in-season was Arizona, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Yeah, I've never really watched the in-season one like I've watched.
I didn't do the Cardinals. The Dolphins was interesting enough to me to watch it. There's enough going on. Mike McDaniel's interesting.
McDaniel, yeah.
I think that really highlighted just how big of a locker room guy Christian Wilkins was, which was one of the big selling points for both the Raiders and why the Browns were allegedly interested, in addition to his talent, that he was this big presence for a locker room that was beneficial.
So instead of should I try to play this or not? We can just kind of go over the points now. We got a half hour left here. So on the NFL Insiders today, Andrew Berry went on. Of course, wouldn't comment about Amari Cooper's contract status because he doesn't do that, but said we have an affinity for Amari Cooper, and love that word usage by Andrew, and then and basically danced around it, but made it sound like he's going to be here, but he's going to be here no matter what, right? Unless they make some wild trade, right? So you can't really take much from what he said about the situation, right?
No, it just really exemplifies how much Andrew Berry hates about talking contracts in public. That he doesn't want to send the wrong message to anyone about it. I like the idea that he says, if I'm voting for or against Amari Cooper, I vote for. Is basically as far as he's willing to go. As I said, he's never going to be that guy that does those type of things. So. And I think even in the clips, like of course, the interview, like they sort of acknowledge how much he hates doing this and sort of move on to questions that he's going to be more comfortable with.
Yeah. But it was interesting because he found a way to say all positive stuff about Amari, but really just tell us what we already knew. You know what I mean? He's a great part of our culture. We, of course, we want Amari. He's going to be part of the team. Da da da. Well, of course he is. He's under contract for another year, so it doesn't really answer anything. He said that DeShaun Watson was ahead of schedule, was the other soundbite we had. And there's a Chubb soundbite too, but let's talk about that. Like do you take anything from that? Does that mean anything to you? I mean, we saw him throw very little at the end, but he really let it go kind of on the last day of camp a little bit for the first time, right? We kind of saw him just let one fly, and he threw a couple balls down the field, 35 yards, whatever, with some velocity. It feels like you're never going to take anything from that beyond like, hey, whatever. But I feel like you could say, if you didn't tell me he had surgery on his shoulder, I wouldn't be able to tell from watching him in that final day. Would you agree?
So, yes, I think ahead of schedule is largely referring to him being able to throw in 7-on-7. Because at that point now he's throwing unexpected throws. He's throwing off-schedule throws. You're talking about one of those deep balls where he's rolling to his left, contorting his shoulder around and driving it down the field. As opposed to what he had been doing up to that point, was everything was on air. You knew what was going to happen. You could sort of plan for it, even if there was a drill with it that might ask him to shift in the pocket or do something like that. Ultimately, the ball was going to come out when he knew when the ball was going to come out for the most part in a position that was comfortable. So that to me is what ahead of schedule ends up meaning, that they had gotten past that. And if it was just a one mini camp, you got to throw 7-on-7 and not feel like he was limited in that, which clears the way for him to be full go for training camp. Whether or not he's throwing every day, that part remains to be seen. I would assume he will be.
6 weeks. Yeah, I would think so.
With another 6 weeks, given what he's been doing to this point. He may take a trip or something like that, but ultimately he's in the mode of getting ready for the season and ramping up and doing those things. So I expect that's going to continue. So that part is ahead of schedule. I think as I talked about the whole time, was like my deadline for when I need him to be ready was training camp.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was able to do that at the end of mini camp is why I think ahead of schedule is relevant.
Ahead of schedule.
I do think the strength looked fine. Like, again, all the things that Andrew Berry said, where it's basically, if you didn't know he was hurt, you wouldn't think he was hurt. I agree.
Yeah.
Without the context of he's not throwing every day or, whatever. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I agree. James McKee in the chat, they've been saying he'll be ready for week 1, so he's ahead of that, so that's good, right?
Yes, but like even when he proclaimed that at his restaurant opening, it was like the most meaningless proclamation he could make. It was like, yeah, I'm going to be ready for week 1. Well, yeah, it's in September. You better be ready for week 1. My worry was like, you have the necessary weeks of training camp to ramp up and be ready to go, that we're not sort of like, oh, I guess he's healthy enough to start this week. And then we get this extremely clunky, not confident thing where he's now feeling it out live on the field, which is what happened after he dealt with the initial shoulder injury. Like, no, the training camp was always my thing. Now it was a question of, would he miss some training camp? Would he, maybe start in August or whatever? But and maybe that was a real question mark at points, but ultimately they got to the point where they felt good to be at the Landmark. If he's ready to go full go for training camp, the Browns are in good shape in terms of being able to get him fully prepared, fully integrated, because now they're not thinking about hopefully by that point he's not thinking about it. He's just focusing on what the defense is doing, what he's got to do. And then the Browns organization is no longer thinking about it, other than maybe the medical staff just sort of monitoring it, but that Stefanski isn't thinking about it, that Ken Dorsey isn't thinking about it, that they're just worried about what do we have to do to get ready for the season? What do we have to do to make sure he's confident executing A, B, and C?
Yeah, there's two kinds of ready for week 1, right? There's like, hey, he's healthy and he's, he can go do whatever 100%, but he hasn't necessarily prepared all the way. Or there's ready in the fact that, like, we're hoping he's ready now, where he's participated in OTAs and minicamp, and he's been ramping up and he's fully out there for all of training camp and whatnot. And that's the kind of ready for week 1 we want, which we didn't really know at the time.
it's ready versus Joe Burrow ready, where Joe Burrow
Yes.
the last 2 seasons has had to sort of be like figure it out as he went, and it wasn't pretty. Now Joe Burrow has the proven track record and then was able to quickly ramp up into being Joe Burrow. DeShaun Watson does not have that track record. That would be a real reason to be worried that he's trying to figure this out on the fly. Fortunately, that seems to be something they are avoiding unless something else comes up, which hopefully it does not.
They asked about Nick Chubb to Andrew. What did he say exactly about Chubb? I forget exactly what he said.
No timeline, just that they wanted to make sure that the Steelers game wasn't his last carry as a Brown.
Oh yeah, they talked about how he Chubb's quote about how the Browns did him right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that Nick Chubb was happy that the Browns, that he said about the most revealing thing he said in his media availability, which was one of the all-timers. I enjoyed that so much. It was like a skit. I am where I need to be, or I am, all that stuff. But that it meant a lot to him that the Browns didn't sort of cut bait when he was damaged goods, essentially, and were invested in him as much as he is with his team. Again, a positive message I think you sent to your locker room.
Yes.
Goodwill, all those things. In addition to, obviously, it might prove to have been the right move to cut bait. We'll see what happens, but certainly there's an argument to be made, and certain cold-hearted Brits would make that argument and say you should move on and save the money and use it elsewhere. Where you don't want that to be what sports is, even though it's valuable to have somebody with that Belichick lizard brain who says, "Nope, that's it, got to move on."
I mean, you're right. It potentially could point out to be that, but to Chubb's own quote, he's been counted out before or whatever. I wouldn't bet against him. I agree with that as far as recovery goes. But even if it does prove that maybe the best decision would move on, I feel like there is some benefit to just even having him around culturally and for who he is. And, like he was around for all the stuff last year and everything. So, I mean, even if if he couldn't play hypothetically, and I think he will be able to at some point, but just his presence, I think that's good enough this year. If that's the bare minimum you get.
He is a walking, occasionally talking reminder of how hard you have to work to be in the NFL and to be that level. Like nobody's going to outwork him. And you have that always around the facility. Because chances are he's already there when you get there. And he may be there, he may be leaving and he's still in there. So that does have an impact. And it's and the other part about that is it's a reminder to players how finite your career can be, that you could be one hit away. So there's that much more reason to prepare your body right. Make sure you're doing everything to prepare as much as possible to not only be successful, but to protect yourself.
Last question, because the Garage Beers is coming up here in a couple minutes, so stick around for that here on the OBR streaming network. If you're watching on X, hop on over to youtube.com /Orange and Brown Report. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, hook us up in that algorithm, baby, and hit notifications so you know every time we go live with one of our shows. So the quote from DeShaun Watson on his podcast about Dorsey, if you know what I'm talking about, right? Where he was talking about, it says a lot about Kevin that he's allowed Dorsey to take the reins and do all the stuff and everything like that. Many have taken that to mean that Dorsey will be calling plays. Are you still in the I'm still in the boat that I think Kevin calls plays. Are you still with me?
Yes. I think the biggest thing is that Stefanski is allowing Dorsey to coach because those guys need to hear his voice.
Yeah.
What he's incorporating, he needs to be able to teach it effectively and communicate what he wants. They need to get accustomed to that. But they were flipping who was calling plays every day. And this is like some giant revelation about this. Look, Dorsey's going to have a major influence, but Alex Van Pelt likely had a major influence. Now, look, if they get to it in training camp, which is where I assume this stuff is still going to be going because they need to run the offense against a defense. They need to make live adjustments, potentially through the through the joint practices and preseason games, perhaps. They need to find out what's the best fit, not just to call the offense and have a sense of the plays, but who's the guy who's talking to the quarterback consistently. If ultimately, I think that's the tipping point. Who has the best rapport in terms of being able to give Watson notes, understanding what they want to have happen in the situation. Because Kevin Stefanski's already proven that he's a very, very good play caller. And he does those things at the quarterback position. I've said, will continue to say, I think Kevin Stefanski being in the headset with the quarterback is a factor in why 4 different quarterbacks won football games for the Browns last year, because he has an understanding of what they need to hear, the information he needs, the situation, all of those things. Even when PJ Walker is told, don't throw the ball, and he tries to throw the ball over the middle of the field, that stuff is valuable, and I don't think they're going to lose that. I still am waiting to hear from somebody where else Kevin Stefanski can make a bigger impact than talking to his quarterback every play between, every offensive snap, because I don't think you're going to find that. And his ability to do that has proven to help you win football games. So I think you're going to ride with that. Now, that not a shot at Dorsey. I think Dorsey has a huge voice in this. And even Tommy Rees talked about I'll get to it in a second. Even Tommy Rees is talking about how collaborative the process is. They want to hear from you. They want to hear your input. I think that's why those guys signed up to join the Browns in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Him and Charlton and those guys, and Deuce Staley. Like, I don't think Kevin Stefanski hired these guys and tell them to move his chest, coach up his chess pieces, and then he's just going to do it himself. To the international player exemption work, how does it work? He just doesn't count against the roster. So Roy can just hang around and be a 91st player. He's a 6'8", 315 offensive tackle listed. Very interesting player, in part because, at least on what I found, he didn't play high school or college football. He basically walked in. I assume he did some sort of like academy thing that they have internationally. I don't know which one he would have done. Maybe in England, maybe in Africa, but whatever. He's basically been learning most of this in the NFL. This is actually his 3rd team. He started with the Giants. I think may have been with the Vikings because you can't get to the Cleveland Browns without a stopover in the Twin Cities. But anyway, he's been on a couple teams. This is the 3rd one. You have no idea what's going to happen with him. I think because he's Nigerian, there's a little bit of an incentive for the Browns to want to add him up because they are trying to continue to expand marketing that. But he's also just a giant human being. And even with DeJuan Jones and those guys, like, this dude stands out physically, just being so tall and just a big, big body. So Andy Dickerson gets another toy to play with, which I'm a proponent of. I want him to get as many young guys as he can, which is what he's been doing, and just coach guys up and figure out the guys you want to find out for your rotation, guys you want on your practice squad, all that stuff.
Perfect. So stay tuned here on the OBR streaming network for Garage Beers with Mike and the guys, as they'll take it over here in a couple of minutes at 9 o'clock. Before we get out of here from the React, which, little technical difficulties tonight, but we'll get it sorted out before next week for sure. Any parting words for our those of you that hung with us here tonight?
Just from me, I'll have a roster projection up tomorrow.
Nice.
No names, but I was horrified at some of the things I saw. So I saw it in the wild, so I came up with my own. So if you want to know who's going to make the team, waste no time. We're going to turn injuries off, and that's going to be it.
There you go. I like that. Check that out at the OBR. Stick with us at the OBR, wall-to-wall coverage of everything Browns as we get through this 6-week, which, may not be as quiet as we thought with all the stuff kind of going on here. So a lot to talk about still. Keep it locked for everybody over there at the Fumble says he's making the 53. If everybody over there at the OBR for Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. This has been another edition of the React. We will see you next week with live videos. We are out.